All right, guys. So I have my coffee and I'm going to start this podcast, this episode, with sipping a nice cup of coffee because coffee makes me feel good. And when I like to chat with my friends, family, or with you guys, I don't know, it just feels nice to have a cup of coffee. So and it's especially when there's a nice, cute dog, a nice, cute dog on it. I like this color. So, today I wanted to talk to you guys about learning multiple languages at the same time and habit forming. And this is because recently, for me, I've been actually learning quite a few languages at the same time. And this is something that, although I have tried in the past, I haven't done it, I think, effectively or actively in terms of long term language learning. So, what does that all mean? Okay, let's break it down. First of all, I want to talk about, is it possible learning more than one language at the same time? Obviously, the answer is yes, it's possible, right? It is possible. I'm sure you guys are wondering, is it effective? Is it ideal? Or is it realistic? And my answer would be to compare language learning to playing instruments in terms of dedicating time to a new skill. I have a lot of in my throat today. Sorry about that. There will be a lot of coughs in this episode. But basically, let's say, for example, that you wanted to learn guitar and you wanted to learn piano and you wanted to learn the violin. These are three separate instruments that will take time to learn, right? They will take time. You have to dedicate time, and every day you only have a certain amount of time to dedicate to these instruments: guitar, piano, and violin. Maybe you like guitar the most, so naturally you end up spending more time playing the guitar. And then maybe you want to play piano the second most, so you end up playing piano the second most. And violin kind of falls at the side. Although you want to play it, sometimes you pick it up and sometimes you practice. If someone asked me, for example, do you think you can become proficient in piano as well as a professional pianist in 1 year? I would say probably not, but if you dedicated 4, 5, or 6 hours a day to the piano, in a year's time, you will become incredibly proficient at the piano. Maybe not like a professional, but maybe in a specific genre, like jazz. Maybe you can become really proficient in jazz piano if you can dedicate 4, 5, 6 hours of your time a day to that one instrument. But like we said before, you might also want to play guitar and you might also want to play violin. So those 4, 5, or 6 hours now have to get split up. And so maybe you're doing 3 hours of piano, 2 hours of guitar, and 1 hour of violin. It's still a lot of good time spent with music. You're still learning how to read music. You're hearing music from different genres, different instruments. And so the question is, does violin help my piano skills? Does piano help my guitar skills? Does guitar help my piano and violin skills? I think yes. Learning several instruments at the same time can have a lot of crossover. And if you learn one song in one language, if you learn one song in one instrument, learning how to play it on another instrument might be easier. And language learning, I think, is similar. So if I wanted to become proficient in Japanese and Mandarin and Cantonese, these are three separate languages, right? Japanese, Mandarin, and Cantonese. So Japanese, obviously, it's spoken in Japan. Mandarin spoken throughout China, and Cantonese also spoken in Hong Kong, right? There's other regions it's spoken in, but let's just make it simple. There's three different languages, right? If I want to become native like in, let's say, Japanese in 1 year's time, even if I dedicate 4, 5, 6 hours a day, becoming like a native speaker is going to be really hard just because you need more time than that. Like I always say, 1 hour a day is not enough, right? But what if I also want to be good at not just Japanese, but Mandarin and Cantonese? Now I have to split up my time. Here's where it gets, I think, complicated, but I think it's based on priorities and then habit forming. I think most people in the beginning stages of learning a new language, especially when you're immersing in the language and you're trying to acquire the language, not study it, right? We're not studying the language. We're trying to acquire it and immerse it to become proficient, similar to a native, right? Most people starting out, I want to learn Japanese. I want to become a native. Like, I want to become native like. They're not going to be able physically to spend 4, 5, or 6 hours a day on Japanese. Why? It's too hard to handle. You're watching Japanese for 5 minutes and you become tired because it's really hard on your brain. Your brain can't handle all this new information. So you can't do 4, 5, 6 hours a day of a new language because it's really hard. It's like, imagine tomorrow you have to start learning how to play piano and you started playing 4, 5, 6 hours a day. That's too much time. You can't handle it. You're not able to handle all that information yet. So in the beginning stages of learning a language, let's say it's Japanese, like my case, I'm learning Japanese. In the beginning, maybe you can only dedicate 30 minutes or an hour and a half before it becomes too buri. I don't know the best word for buri in English. Before it becomes too much. However, you still might have the energy to kind of dabble in another foreign language. Like, oh, I learned Japanese today for like an hour and a half. Maybe I'll try some Mandarin. And maybe watch Mandarin for 10 minutes, right? Maybe watch shows or dramas or a movie in Mandarin for 10 minutes. It's possible. And not only is it possible, it actually, I think, does help your ear recognize different sounds. So if I'm trying to become really good at Japanese, but I'm also learning Mandarin, I think my ear having to listen to sounds in Mandarin is going to help my ear listening to sounds in Japanese. I think they will help each other. There's a little bit of crossover. And it doesn't matter what language it is. If I'm learning Polish or if I'm learning German, my ear has to work hard to understand those languages. So if I'm learning Japanese, it's going to help German or Polish or Arabic or Mandarin is going to help my Japanese because now my Japanese ears have more sounds to work with. So I think in the beginning stages, it's fun, it's possible, and it can be helpful because I think there are different sounds in different languages that help us understand different sounds in other languages. So I think it's possible, and I think in the beginning stages of one specific language, it's not that bad, or it doesn't get in the way of the main language someone's trying to learn. But here's where I think recently, for me personally, I've been noticing some interesting things, I guess you could say. Okay. First thing is this. Recently, I've really been spending a lot of time learning Japanese, and it's so much fun. I've finally got in a groove. So every day I'm excited to learn Japanese, and I feel that the time I'm spending in Japanese can be more and more and more, and I want to spend more and more time on it, right? So for example, for the past like 2 weeks, every morning, the first thing I do is I wake up, I pop in my headphones, I listen to, I have my phone, and I listen to a show or a movie that I watched in Japanese, and I'm just listening to my ears, listening to it in my AirPods. So I'm making coffee in the morning. I'm waking up. I'm stretching, and I got the earphones in, and I take a shower. I put the phone on the windowsill, and I play it on the speaker. I come out of the shower. I'm listening to Japanese. For example, I have a TV. You guys know I have my dedicated Japanese TV. It's always has Japanese on. So right now it's muted. There's the mute button. But if I unmute it, right, my TV's right here. I always am listening to Japanese now. But here's the issue. I recently, as you guys know, about 1 year ago, I started learning Cantonese, right? Cantonese is spoken in Hong Kong and the Guangdong region of China because I thought it'd be fun to start a new language, right? Just as a trial, doing the methodology that I preach on my channel. And it was a lot of fun, but because of work, because of life, things got busy, and so I couldn't dedicate almost any time to Cantonese, although I still want to learn it. Okay, so remember that, right? I'm learning Japanese, right? Well, we'll keep Korean here for a sec. I have Korean in on the back burner. So Korean is a language I've learned, and I'm still learning. But right now, my main language that I want to get good at is Japanese. About a year ago, I started learning Cantonese. And most recently, I've told nobody this at all. But recently, about a week ago, I started learning Mandarin. So let me tell you why. I've been playing pickleball since 2024 August, right? So in 2024 August, I started playing pickleball. It's like the most addicting sport. But at the pickleball courts, like 60%, 70% of the people there, they speak some sort of version of Chinese, right? So I don't know if you guys know this. Obviously, in Korean, there's a lot of confusion between like Chinese as a language, but there are a lot of different Chinese languages. So the most common one that most of you have probably heard of is Mandarin, right? Mandarin. Then there's Cantonese. There's also Fujianese, right? There's a lot of different Chineses. However, at the pickleball courts, so many people speak Mandarin and Cantonese. So when I started playing pickleball back in August, I was like, wow, yeah, like it'd be kind of cool to be able to speak Cantonese right now. I wish I had put more time into it. And then after listening to people, a lot of people speak Mandarin. And so I thought it'd be really funny if secretively I just start learning Mandarin, and then in like 2 or 3 years' time, all my pickleball friends who speak Chinese, I could then understand them and converse with them in Mandarin Chinese, right? So I started learning Mandarin about a week ago, and it started making me think about habit forming, because as I'm getting better and better and better at Japanese, I want to spend more time on it. And I can spend more time on it, and I have the energy. When I first started, right, it's very hard to spend 5 hours a day on Japanese. But right now, I feel like I can do that. I have the energy. I'm always listening to something. I always have the TV on, right? I always have my AirPods ready. I'm always listening to Japanese. But now a part of me goes, man, I should learn more Cantonese, and I really want to learn Mandarin all of a sudden. It's exciting. But if I think about it like the instruments, right? I really want to get good at guitar, for example. Should I spend time on the piano? Because then I don't have more time on the guitar. And I think a good place to start is noticing your habits and allowing time to be spent through habit forming, opposed to blocking off time for the language. And this is one idea I'm working with recently. This is not something that I'm going to preach dogmatically. This is not something that I think works for everybody. But for example, and I'm sorry. Also, for example, I still have to learn Korean. I still feel that my Korean is not even close to where I want it to be. Like I always tell you guys, sometimes it's still hard hearing things in Korean. Some accents are hard. New words are hard. And when I'm reading, there's plenty of words I've never seen before. So I'm still learning Korean. So me, John, right now, I'm learning and English. Like if you don't spend time in your native language, you're gonna regress. So there's a lot of languages going on in my head right now. The main ones that I want to be really good at are Korean and Japanese. And then it's like Mandarin and Cantonese on the side. But I still do want to do them well. And so the thing is, recently, these have been my habits. I wake up, I put my AirPods in, I listen to Japanese, I'm listening. I do work. I make videos. I do this sort of thing for you guys. I have my other channels as well. And in my break time or in my downtime, more Japanese. I go to pickleball. I ride my scooter. to pickleball. I'm listening to Japanese. When I come home after a long day's work, I guess you could say, and after playing some sports, there is a moment around dinner time where I really want to watch stuff in Mandarin. It just feels that way, like the sun's setting and it's like getting dark, and I'm eating, and I'm like, ooh, Mandarin would be nice. So I just watch I watch some shows in Mandarin while I eat. And maybe that takes like 20 minutes of my day, 20 or 30 minutes of my day, and it's fun and it's exciting, and the sounds are so new that it's like nothing but fun. That 10 minutes, that 20 minutes, that 30 minutes a day isn't really affecting my Japanese that much. However, if I add 30 minutes more to my Japanese every day, my Japanese is going to get that much better. So it's not necessarily a conflict, but I noticed I don't want to watch Japanese right now at dinner time. I want to watch stuff in Mandarin. That sounds fun. And I'm allowing my habits to kind of grow. Whereas in the past, you guys know, I tried learning Japanese when I first started learning Korean, and I would try to separate time slots, but I was such a perfectionist that I wanted to only get good at Korean. And you guys know the results. My Korean's pretty good. Objectively speaking, for a foreigner, it's very good. My Korean's very good, right? Objectively speaking. I think there are times to be modest and times to just, kind of look at things with an objective lens. My Korean's really good, but I was spending 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day in Korean for 3 years at least. And Japanese, I kept trying to put it in there, but it wasn't part of my daily habits. And the better I got at Korean, the more I wanted to get good at it. And so Japanese, same thing. I feel like I'm hearing so much recently. Like my Japanese ears are growing, they're maturing, and I'm like finally understanding stuff like really well. And I'm shocked at how easy it is, because all I do is this. This is how I learn Japanese. I just watch shows, right? And then I listen to them. I'm not speaking right now because it's not fruitful. So it's like there's a conflict growing within me. Do I spend as much time as possible on Japanese, or should I allow myself to dabble in other languages? I was never someone who thought becoming a polyglot was like a realistic thing. I think it's kind of like silly to like call yourself that, but that's just my opinion. Because I feel that you really, really, really get the most out of a language when you're really good at it. I know some people say the majority of what you can get from a language comes from like the simple stuff. I don't believe that. I think the better you're at the language, the more you can get from it. That just seems kind of obvious to me, although other people don't think so. And the point is, I'm noticing my habits are forming. Every morning I wake up, I put in AirPods, listen to Japanese. I do 무지막 시청 플러스. I watch and I look up words through audio. That's how I'm looking up words. So I do that every morning now. Mostly every morning, obviously. Not every single morning. Some days are different. But I wake up, AirPods, boom, shower, come out, go on my computer and watch Japanese. Focused, really just focused. 20 to 40 minutes. And I've been doing that for the past 2 weeks. Because of that, I'm listening to it more. I want to hear it more. I want to put in all the time and effort. But then I start thinking about other languages. I'm like, oh no, wait a minute. I still have to get better at Korean. I want to be good at Mandarin and I want to be good at Cantonese. How do I do this? For example, this is a Korean book that I'm reading recently. I'm on chapter 3, 용의자들, suspects, I guess you would call it, probably. This is TMI. It's TMI, but I think it's important. I read this book 90% of the time when I'm reading this book, it's in the bathroom. Because in the bathroom, the book is on the shelf and I just grab it open, pop it open and read it. That's been the habit I have for reading Korean books, right? Because I know I need to read Korean books at my level in order to improve my Korean. Once you get to a high level, I always say this, once you get to a higher level, you should be reading all the time, opposed to watching videos. You'll get the most bang for your buck if you read. But I haven't been reading Korean or reading in Korean really in like the past 3 years, and I feel very bad about that. And I know that's affecting my potential language gains. So I'm reading this in Korean. But the best part is that reading one page in Korean, for example, this is not perfect science. There's so much language when you get from reading that you don't get from watching, right? But at this level, if I read one chapter, that may be equivalent to 5 hours of watching Japanese. And instead of trying to calculate every single thing I'm doing, I realized I should just let myself follow my habits. So turns out in the bathroom, I like reading Korean books. Turns out when I'm riding my scooter, I like listening to Japanese audio, right? Around dinner time, I like listening to stuff in Mandarin for 10, 20 minutes. And I think it's important to follow these habits because someone like me, kind of a perfectionist, always wants to calculate everything when it comes to skill building. I want to be able to track every minute I've listened to Japanese. I want to be able to track every second I've watched Mandarin and Cantonese. And Mandarin, I am doing that. I am tracking every minute actually for Mandarin because it's simple. But the thing is, if you get neurotic about calculating stuff so much, it can have a negative influence on your journey because then every time you're learning the language, it becomes a calculation and not something enjoyable. So just want to make sure. So let's wrap this up by saying this. If Japanese, for me, if it was my absolute number one priority in life, I would be spending so much time on it that I probably wouldn't be learning other languages at the same time. Because once you get to a certain skill level, naturally, it'll maintain itself because you will naturally watch videos in that language, talk to people in that language, read books in that language. So naturally, your level would stay. You have to get to a certain level before it can kind of maintain itself through minimal exposure. So if Japanese was the first thing in the most important thing to me right now, then I would be probably not learning Cantonese or Mandarin. But it's not the number one priority in my life. And so it's easy for me to not care so much about my Japanese skills because it's not the most important thing in my life. I know for some of you, learning English is the most important thing right now. So to you, if your number one thing is learning English, I would just say, spend all your time in English then. Don't learn other languages, because although in the beginning stages it'll help, right? Like 10 minutes of Mandarin, 10 minutes of Filipino, 10 minutes of Arabic. Hearing those other languages will help you, right? They will allow your ear to hear different sounds. But if you have 10, 10, 10, 10, 10 minutes here and there, that's like an hour. Imagine you add an hour a day to your number one priority. You're going to get more gains. And I personally think there is something interesting about language learning where it's kind of hard to waste time spending time in the language if you're doing it correctly. So if you're immersing, if you're listening, if you're watching, if you're reading in English, right? It's almost never going to be negative. Every single second spent is going to help you. I don't think there are a lot of diminishing returns when it comes to language learning, because as we know, like a native English speaker up until the age of 66 is still learning new words in their mother tongue in English. So it's like I kind of feel this could be wrong, but I kind of feel like there's not a lot of diminishing returns in language learning. Every single second you're spending hearing a word pronounced one way or the other is going to help you in that understand that language. So, I think learning multiple languages at the same time, I don't think it's ideal if one of those languages is your number one priority. If it's your number one priority, I would say for a certain period of time, just spend all your time on that language until you get so good that you can kind of leave it to the side and your skills won't really diminish much. Then pick up a new language. That's what I'm doing with Japanese, right? I went so hard in Korean to learn Korean that every time I tried to learn Japanese, I was like, no, this 30 minutes, this hour on Japanese, waste of my time, put it off to the side. I want that hour, I want that 30 minutes for my Korean. Because you could learn 3 hours a day in Korean and then 1 hour a day in Japanese, or 4 hours a day in Korean. And over a year's time, that's 365 extra hours. That's 150 movies. That's like 60 shows. That's like 30 books. So an hour a day, like I always say, an hour a day is not enough to become good at a foreign language, like a native speaker. An hour a day is not enough. Several hours a day is where you want to start, is where you want to be. And you want to maintain that for a long period of time. For some people, it'll take a year. For some people, it'll take 3 years, depending on how much time you spend. But if learning one language is not your number one priority in life, then it's okay to dabble in other languages. It's not going to affect you that much because you're not trying to go that hard anyway. So I know a lot of you guys are learning English, you're learning Mandarin, you're learning other languages. It's okay. The realistic answer is, yeah, it's fine. It's like playing several instruments. You want to get good at piano? Play piano. Are you also interested in guitar? Play guitar. Do you also want to play the violin? Play the violin. It's fine. Do you want to be as good as like a professional jazz piano player in 3 years' time? Well, you might want to put the guitar and you might want to put the violin away and spend all that time on the piano. Because if that's your goal, you got to go crazy. You got to go hard, right? You got to really put the hours and dedication into it. So I would say that, right? The question you have to ask yourself is English, or the language that I'm learning, my number one priority in life, like absolute number one priority? If the answer is yes, ignore the other languages and go all in on that language. Then once you become proficient, once you become native-like, then you can bring down the time and let other languages come in, right? However, if the language you're learning is not the number one priority in life, then Play with it. Let your habits decide. Oh, turns out when I wake up, I like to listen to English podcasts. When I go to sleep, I like to listen to Japanese podcasts. Let your habits form, because habits won't get in the way of like trying to calculate everything. Like, allow your habits to just be habits. If you watch Japanese anime before you go to bed, that's fine, and you're going to learn. If you listen to English podcasts when you wake up, that's fine, you're going to learn. And that's good. It'll take longer to get better at both. But if one of them is absolute priority, when you wake up and you're listening to English podcasts, go to sleep, you should be listening to watching English stuff. Like, do you know what I'm saying? I know this is kind of me babbling now at this point, but I feel that it's kind of important to say. Yes, you can learn multiple languages at the same time. It's fine. I would say, though, depending on your goals and depending on your current level, you should think about how much time you want to spend on each. Is it my number one priority? Okay, then let me just focus on this one. And then maybe sometimes, you let the other languages into your life. That's kind of how I feel. The objective answer is that it's going to take longer to get better in both languages if you're spending time on both languages or multiple languages. It will take longer, right? That's like objectively, to my understanding, what I know, that's how it works. For example, kids who grow up in a bilingual environment, they understand two languages less than people who grow up with one language. So if you have a bilingual kid and a monolingual kid, the monolingual kid, let's say this person learns English and Japanese growing up as a kid, and this person learns English. The English kid, the English only kid, will know more English than this Japanese and English kid, right? This person's gonna know a lot more language in English, okay? However, this person is going to be more of a creative thinker and understand problem solving, and these sort of things. They'll have the edge, so to speak. This is what I've read. This is what I've heard. This is what the science apparently says. So the answer is you want to be good at one language, then spend more time in that. You want to be good at multiple languages, that'll help you in other aspects in life, but not necessarily going to make you as proficient as you could be if you only spent time in that language. So yes, the answer is you can learn multiple languages at the same time. It's fine. It depends on your priorities. And then also, if you are learning multiple languages at the same time, especially at the beginner stages when it's not so comfortable, I would say let your habits grow. Let your habits be habits, and don't try to calculate so much, because based on your habits, you might end up liking one language more than the other or not. So I hope this video has been helpful for you guys today, and I will see you next time. Yeah. And if you don't have time right now, save this next video to your watch later playlist. So when you do have time, grab a cup of coffee and give it a watch. That action alone helps this channel quite a lot. Thank you.